Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, I got a very, very special guest, somebody that was very impactful in my own magical career, especially in the Thelemic style of magic. Somebody who probably even really set up how I even did my rituals. Like I went through the Living Thelema book, and that highly impacted the way I practiced and the way I even changed my outlook on magic itself. So this is very, very special for me, and I'm very excited to have Dr. David Shoemaker on. But before we introduce him, I would like to introduce the other rejects. And I got Judith the Loon with us. What is going on, Judith? How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here. You could catch me on YouTube and on X as the Loon with my weekly brunch and every my monthly um, buddy check.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. And my man, Headless Giant. What is going on, sir?
How you doing? You can find me on Twitter and on YouTube. You can check out my trialogues with Ethan Indigo and Ricardo Calvario this morning. It was a banger. So yeah, check that out. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for making it. And my man, Brandon Magus in the media. What is going on?
Thank you so much for having me again, Nick. I love being on this show. I'm so excited to have Dr. David Shoemaker as you, Nick. He also was pivotal in my own journey, read all his books. His voice is soothing as well. So it's always great when I read his books. I have it in my head. Thank you for having me. Magus in the media, just head on over to YouTube, X, as well as Instagram. Subscribe, like, and share. It's all magic. It's all myth. It's all meaning here. Let's get it done today.
If you listen to his podcast and then read the book, it's like you can literally hear his voice. Like
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
And Robbie Marks, please, the storyteller himself. Thank you very much for joining us. What is going on, sir?
Yeah, I was excited for this one. It's good to meet you, David. I'm R. Marks, or Robbie Marks, artist illustrator, and you can check out all my stuff at my Linktree, which is Linktree RMARX, and that'll pull up all my miscellaneous things. Thanks, Nick.
Of course. No, thank you for joining us. And again, like I said, we do have Dr. David Shoemaker joining us. He is a clinical psychologist, author, and longtime teacher in the Thelemic tradition. He's widely known for making complex Thelemic and initiatory material more practical and approachable, especially through his work on ritual, meditation, psychology, and spiritual development. Dr. Shoemaker is the author of Living Thelema, The Winds of Wisdom, and The Way of the Will, and he's also deeply involved in Thelemic training through the Temple of the Silver Star, with decades of experience working with students in both OTO and AA-related practice. David Shoemaker describes himself as a clinical psychologist in private practice with specialization in Jungian and cognitive behavioral psychotherapy. On his official site, he also identifies himself as a chancellor and prolocutor, I'm screwing that up, of the Temple of the Silver Star, and notes he has been involved with the OTO as a student of and as a student of AA since 1993. Today, we're going to get into Thelema, Astrum Argentum, spiritual attainment, practical magic, and how psychology and mysticism intersect in real practice. Dr. Shoemaker, thank you very much for coming on the show, and welcome to the Occult Rejects. Would you please let everybody know where they can find anything about you or what you would like to plug or advertise?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. So I have a presence on Facebook and Instagram, and the Living Thelema podcast, which still exists. I just do it intermittently. You can find all that archived over the years at livingthelema.com. Also, there is a Living Thelema dedicated YouTube channel that has archives of every Living Thelema episode. And organizationally, you can find the organizations I administer. The AA is at onestarinsight.org, and the Temple of the Silver Star is at totss.org.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Again, like I do with every guest that I have on for this type of topic, I normally just start off with, how did you find yourself like one day saying like ritual ceremonial magic's my thing? Like, what got you there?
Yeah, interesting story, at least for me. But I was a graduate student in psychology, getting my doctorate in Indiana State. This was 92, 93. And I had come out of college more or less an atheist, going through the sort of generic clinical psychology training, but I realized I wanted more than was being offered. I wanted something with more depth and mystery to it, really, than kind of cut and dried cognitive behavioral work and so on. So I'd always been interested in Carl Jung, and there was an influential professor in our department who was also interested in Jung. So he and I started a book club, basically, to kind of let people who are interested get more content around Jung. And we did that for a few years. And as I got my degree and went out into practice, I focused on Jung. But in the middle of grad school, as that was starting up, and I was getting more into Jung, I realized I needed something in my personal life that was more numinous, as Jung might have said, that had a spiritual quality, that had a mystery to it. And so I started doing some reading, around the vaguely occult and pagan books that were available at the time. This is pre-internet, of course, and uh, read some Wiccan pagan materials from Llewellyn. But what really caught my eye within a few months of doing that, Llewellyn books. What really caught my eye within a few months of doing that was that in the back of those Wiccan pagan books were ads for things like The Golden Dawn by Regardi and The Middle Pillar by Regardi. And I thought, actually, that sounds more like what I'm kind of looking for. So I read those books. And the really pivotal moment was when I got The Middle Pillar by Regardi, where he explicitly links Kabbalistic psychology with the work of Carl Jung and the work of Aleister Crowley. And that just sort of got my head spinning, and I knew it would be my life's work. I didn't know how it would be my life's work, but I knew it would be. So that was 1993. That's when I got initiated into OTO and into the broader tradition behind the AA and Temple of Silver Star. And so that's the origin story.
That's awesome. Does anybody have anything before I start asking questions?
Yeah, I think it kind of helped knowing that, Wicca and the Gardnerian tradition really had, its roots in AA and the Golden Dawn. And so, it was an easy transition, but, a lot of people get stuck on the aesthetics. What about the aesthetics do you like of Golden Dawn versus Wicca tradition?
I think there's beautiful ritual work in all traditions that we've named here, but for me, there was something about, I suppose, if I'm completely honest with myself, there's something about the complexity of sort of Golden Dawn or Thelemic style ceremonial that just was inherently, I just connected with it. Felt more like an expression of where I already was as a person, and so I didn't feel like I was going somewhere else. I felt like I'd found something that was already home to me in that way. Um, that and probably too much reading Lord of the Rings as a kid. That the Gandalf archetype I was ready to connect with. So, but just kind of half joking on that. But yeah, that's my best answer for that. What can you say? It's an intuitive thing that something calls to you.
I get that. I guess, I really would like to get your take on it for listeners to hear, from you.
Mhm.
People say Thelema. What does that mean to you?
Okay, so I'll take it for the absolute newbie here. Thelema is the
Thank
Greek word for will. Will in the sense of divine will, more than a want or a need or a drive. It's more like the basic nature of a person and how they operate in the world. How how they operate is an extension of divine will. That is, we are as individuals here born in a certain condition in a certain place with certain parameters of our strengths and weaknesses and so on, and within that we have a way that we are in the world. There's something unique about each person that explains what they do in this room in this moment as much as it explains what they do over the course of decades in their lives, and it's rooted in their essence as an organism, just like a tree does a certain thing, or an animal does a certain thing, or a river does a certain thing. Each individual does a certain thing. And the task of each of us is to discover that true will. And once we have some conscious awareness of that, we strive to shape a life that will give us maximized opportunities to live that out without as much conflict, with harmony and joy and passion. And what we find is that when people connect with who and what they really are, that tends to go pretty well. You know, we find that as we move through life, doors open rather than close. We find that we feel like we're swimming with the current instead of against it. And much of my work, both in psychology and in the organizations that I work with, has been to just find the best possible tools to unlock that true will awareness in people as efficiently as possible.
Thank you. Beautifully said. Anything else that anybody wants to ask before I keep going along? I guess another one that I wasn't thinking about bringing up, and I, make it boring here, but I just do think it's be interesting for listeners of mine to hear your opinion on this stuff. What would like that do what thou wilt, that whole slogan? What would that mean to you? Or how do you incorporate, what is that in your life?
Okay, yeah. So for clarity, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law is the basic statement of Crowley's law of Thelema. And that's simply, to me, a statement that the way the universe works is that the central law of unfolding life is that everything does what it is here to do. Everything proceeds according to that basic nature. So it's the whole of the law. And what we are here to do in our lifetimes is, again, to strive to discover that and live it out. So that's the work I did and continue to do, and every day striving to hone that down. But basically, when I was describing what happened with reading Middle Pillar and Rigardi, in that moment, that was a lightning bolt of, I am here to do this, not like I think it would be cool to do this, or I could get rich doing this, or something like that. It's that this is my nature to do this in this world. And the law part of it for me is, it better be my law to do what I'm here to do, otherwise I am going to be swimming upstream, and I am going to be, missing opportunities to fully actualize myself in the world and to help people doing that, and so on. So do what thou wilt for me is do what you're here to do in every moment you can.
Thank you. Anybody got anything to add? Okay. What would you say are the biggest beginner mistakes you do see in modern occultism when people do approach Thelema?
How much time do you
I'm
have?
trying to put you on the spot here. No, sorry.
No, I think one of them, of course, relates to what we're just talking about, which is that people approach Thelema thinking, oh, it means do whatever you want, and that's the opposite of what it means. It means do the specific things that you are suited to do, be the certain things you're suited to be, and not other stuff, even if you want it. So it's actually quite the opposite of do whatever you want. Of course, that sort of misunderstanding has fueled a lot of the public misunderstanding of Crowley the whole time since he's been alive. Even the tabloids in the 1920s got on that high horse. So, mistakes. I lost the question there for a second.
Sorry.
So one mistake is misapprehending what do what thou wilt means. Another is thinking that diving right into advanced practices is a quicker way to get to the results they want. Because if you skip the part of the basic training, which is you getting to know how to move energy, contain it within yourself, channel it where you want to, manage your own physical and energetic self You skip all that stuff, no matter what you try to do is not going to go as well. And so what you end up doing, what those kind of people end up doing often is skipping to advanced stuff, either getting confused or feeling screwed up by it because they didn't know themselves very well and didn't know their energetic system very well. And then having to say, I guess I better go back and learn the basics. I kind of liken it to deciding to be a poet without knowing the alphabet yet. Sure, you can try, you know, but I think, you know, you get the foundations first. And I say this not in a way that it is to be rigid with it. Like, experimentation is fine. You're always going to make mistakes, and we can always try stuff that we haven't tried yet and figure out if we were ready. Maybe that's how we discovered we weren't. But in general, I think that's a pretty common misapprehension, that it'll be quicker if I head right to the sexy stuff, but then it ends up being actually slower because they have to circle back and learn foundations. I guess in a similar vein, it's that old saying about a little knowledge being a dangerous thing, but people get a little bit of meditative success or a little bit of ritual success, or sometimes have the psychedelic experience that convinces them they're at the end point instead of the beginning point, without the infrastructure of the non-drug related, muscles that are needed for doing good magic and mystical work. So it's kind of like early success bringing a false sense of attainment and mastery, when really it's just like they've mastered step 1 of 50. But since they haven't mastered more than step 1, they don't know what step 2 mastery feels like. And so that's just a quick summary of a few.
I have a
things.
question.
Yeah.
If you mind.
Sure.
So on that vein, then how do you find it important to, maybe before running into the thelemic work or the work of the Astrum Argentum, do you find it important to work on the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn lectures and those things before you start into that other stuff? Or do you find okay just to skip right ahead? Or is it skipping at all? I that's something that always comes to me. I always wonder about that. And then when I speak to other people who are Thelemites who have never read any of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, they think that it's just gibberish. And so I've always wondered that, especially listening to your stuff.
Yeah, great question. I don't think of that as a sequential thing where it's the Golden Dawn stuff and then you move on or move up to the thelemic stuff. I think I could imagine a number of reasons why that could be the impression. Probably most of them are chronological in terms of the Golden Dawn predating thelemic work. But what you got to remember is that Crowley's whole basic training was in the Golden Dawn, and it is embedded in the systems he was teaching the rest of his life. He's teaching the Golden Dawn LBRP in the 1940s, 3 years before he died. So I don't think it's necessary, particularly for people to pursue Golden Dawn style magic in their personal practice or initiatory wise before doing thelemic work. It's a question of what are they called to. The other thing that is really important here is they go together. Like it's not Golden Dawn or thelema. The Temple of the Silver Star, for example, which I administer, is very explicitly a Golden Dawn patterned order that incorporates thelema as its basic operating principle. So it has woven thelema into not all, but many of the landmarks that we might expect from a Golden Dawn initiatory system. And I think strengthens both in the process. So I've answered your question and then some, but hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Going back to something you were saying earlier, even a thing that I even found myself that I went back, I think it was because of listening to your podcast. And I quoted it kind of, I'm sure I've screwed it up, but I have given you the credit that I think you even say, I don't know if it was in your book or on your podcast, that it may not sound glamorous, but honestly, you're going to have to learn how to meditate. Like, you stressed that a lot. like a lot, I
Yeah.
think, like as a beginner thing. And I do think, like, just from my experience, jumping for me, meditation and getting that down was more important than jumping straight into ritual work.
Yeah, I think I make that point sort of equally around relaxation, even just being able to sit down and get your body relaxed and your mind in the moment is a foundation for anything that comes after. So yeah, relaxation, meditation are another basic beginner error. I think is I don't need to learn how to do that stuff. I want to get right into the ritual. But if you're not relaxed and you're not kind of present in yourself, it's going to hamper your ritual.
Does anybody have any questions?
Well, I had one. So it sounds like the biggest beginner mistake is not being able to tap into the authenticity that they're sort of,
Mhm.
trying to tap into. It's sort of like leaping to the conclusion, well, this is the answer without actually exploring what that means. That seems to be a common problem, across. This is why people go to, psychotherapists to begin with. Have you found that the Thelema work has really helped you, I guess, be a better therapist?
Mm. Certainly. I mean, I think I'm a better human because of it. And no surprise, better humans make better therapists and everything else probably. But more to your probable specific point, I understanding that and really truly believing in my deepest heart and soul that every human being is divine at their core, and anything that gets in the way of that is the problem. It's not that their core is the problem. The personality and all the things that it tries to do to protect itself, all of the expectations that get laid on us by family or society or eventually ourselves. Those are the things that obscure the true will and the true kind of star at the center of each person. So when I'm working with people in therapy, even though we may never say the words true will or thelema or anything remotely like that, what I have an awareness of in the room as sort of my meta model is that we're working on the personality in one example, working on the personality in order to clear away those blockages that allow the real self to shine through. And so often um, that might be what would look like a conventional therapy session around looking at what did your parents kind of want you to be and you didn't want to be, and so we end up talking about what was really under there, what was trying to get out, um, what was the impulse that maybe got stifled a little bit. That's just one specific kind of example, but um, it's that's the more common situation where we're not really talking about it as a true will kind of process, but we're just working on to a fly on the wall would appear kind of a common therapy session. But more and more, because people know my work, they're coming to me as a therapist or a life coach because they're Thelemites or magicians or occultists of some kind, and they want a therapist who has a similar language and understanding and worldview, much like a devoted Christian might seek out a Christian counselor or something like that. So it's a smaller pool at this point, but um, increasingly it's the case that a lot of my therapy sessions might include more overt discussion of magical principles, or I'm just trying to use the language that actually works and is alive for the person I'm working with. So does that
Thank you.
get the question?
Yeah, very much.
Great.
Did anybody else have anything that they wanted to ask before I continue? I don't wanna take away-
Yeah, I was
Go.
gonna kind of want to go back to the idea of the whole of the law, and then
Mhm.
you have the book of the law. You
Mhm.
see, like within the Hebrew cosmology, they have the Torah being the book of the law. As far as the individual law of the self within the micro aspect, can you expand upon that and how that coordinates and interacts with the macro aspect of the law.
Sure. So I think there we're still talking about universal law. It's just, is it expressed through the individual, or is it expressed in the world at large or the universe at large? So I'll come back to that idea that, um, think of any ecosystem you want, and you will have all the components of that ecosystem, the trees and the animals and the grass and everything, doing its best to do what it is destined to do, what is it's programmed to do, in a sense. And that tends to work just fine. The problem is for humans that we get in our own way with that,
There you go.
as I was kind of describing with the therapy examples. But I
Right.
think that the macrocosmic expression of do what thou wilt is really just looking around and seeing that, of course, the universe is doing what it's supposed to do. It's evident that that's the case because it is doing it. you know
Right.
Things work a certain way, and that's not a different kind of law than what we can work with as an individual. It's simply we determine what our role in that is, what is our microcosmic part in the greater work.
Right. Nice.
Yeah, good question.
Anybody else have anything?
I do too. Before you move on, Nick, I keep asking a bunch of people in the occult, magicians in the different spheres. But what do you think of the term self-initiation, especially for those who can't reach, say, an AA school like yourself, or an OTO, or a Golden Dawn? Because it seems like there's such a hatred, and I know self-initiation, the term itself, may even be a rough one, but there seems to be like a closed system where some think you can only ever go to a place and do it. And then there's those of us who maybe don't have that ability. So I just kind of would love to hear your take on those things.
Great. Well, one thing that is self-evident is that people across history have attained without a system, without finding a system of initiation. They do it somehow. Okay, so let's get that off the table. Of course, it's possible to have great gains in self-understanding and in initiatory experience and power through one's own work without formal initiation in a group. That said, some people will thrive more in a formal, structured setting that has kind of a, not just a lineage, but also is what we might call a contacted order, that there are interplane contacts that actually, in my experience, quite literally move through the work we do and make it a specific kind of initiatory experience for its members. You're not going to possibly get that without contact with that organization. That doesn't mean any given organization is the right one, but for a specific person, it might be the right one. And for another person, it might be the absolute wrong one. And they need to do it themselves in order to get the maximum gains, or they need a different organization, a different tradition, or whatever. So I think the efficacy of self-initiation depends a lot on the specific person doing it and what they're cut out for, what their prior experience is, what their innate skills are, or what their innate blind spots are. The success of that kind of endeavor is really going to have a lot of those variables involved. So there may be other angles on this that you wanted to hear about, but that's my first thought.
Nice. No, that does, it answers my question. I'll have more in the future, but that's okay. Thank you.
I guess I would only add briefly that I think there is a problem if someone does self-initiation with, let's say you get a self-initiation in the Golden Dawn book, okay? It would be a mistake to do that. You could have great results, okay? But it would be a mistake to do that and think you are getting the same experience as a formal in-person initiation with a Golden Dawn type group. So as long as people understand it's not the same, but it could be equally powerful for some people.
Yeah, it's to my head when you say that is you must be even have even more critical thinking and being super objective and maybe kind of hard on yourself a little more because nobody is around there to make sure that they kind of like the kung fu teacher with the whip. You got to kind of be your own
Right.
whip. Yeah.
You're right. And one of the other great dangers there is the self-delusion that can come from thinking you're doing it all right when really there you don't have anyone there to say, actually, the tradition is a little bit different than that. Try it this way, or
of course.
confirming that you've had some kind of milestone met, or those things. That's what I'm speaking to now is really the benefits of having a teacher of any kind, someone who's done the work already.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Well, isn't that the poison pill of a personality that is a self-starter to begin with? I mean, they have very little self-reflection, which means, go head first into battle. So
What is it? Ready, fire, aim.
right.
Fine, anybody got anything else before I go on with other questions? Kind of another basic one. Well, I guess not too basic, but I think for my listeners, it'd be very good for them to hear your take on it. What is the whole idea with the Holy Guardian Angel when it comes to ceremonial magic?
Okay. So if you check out the Temple of the Silver Star YouTube channel, I did an archive talk on there on this that I would, for long form discussion of this, I would direct people to. And of course, there's a Living Thelema book chapter and podcast episode on this. Basically, the Holy Guardian Angel is a term that preexisted Crowley, but he latched onto that term as a way of describing whatever it is that we connect with when we attain cosmic consciousness, and awareness and full conscious awareness of true will. So there's no way to talk about this without being reductionistic or using terms that may predispose people to think of it in certain ways, like cosmic consciousness or whatever. But at some point, well, let me start over. The central goal of all of this training in both AA, Temple of the Silver Star, and Crowley's conception of what we're here to do on the planet, the central goal is to strip away those barriers to full conscious awareness of our divine self and of our true will. And that awareness, when it comes, typically, eventually, pretty climactically, is very, very often accompanied by a sense of presence and connection to a being that is beyond ourselves. Now, there may be some people who connect with this as, actually, this is just a part of my brain, or this is just my higher self, or whatever. The good news is once you get there, you don't need anyone to tell you what it is because you're experiencing it. But the many people, experience this as myself included, experience this as a tremendous overturning of the sense of who we are and who we have been in relation to this holy guardian angel that we encounter. When this has occurred, our next task is to work even harder to build a life that honors the truth that we've discovered there. So in the AA system, the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, that's the term that Crowley used for that breakthrough, knowledge and conversation. In the AA system, that's attained at the grade, the initiatory grade of Tefereth in the center of the tree. And then the work beyond that is, now let's make a life that lets me live this out with as few obstacles as possible and with greatest efficiency as possible. And then we take it from there. So the HDA is the power / entity / aspect of the universe / personal God, whatever, that enables all of this to happen. You could also think of it as like I had a friend describe this way to me, which always stuck, that the sun is shining, but there's one ray that's aimed right at you, and that's the HGA. And so you find that, and you tune into that like a radio finding that one station, and that opens up your path.
Thank you so much. That was great. Anybody got anything before I go on? You want to add to that?
It's just very Egyptian symbolism that popped into my head with that, with the idea of the Ra coming down. But there is something like that all throughout history when you're talking about the mystery school tradition, right?
Yeah.
Going back to my favorite book, The Golden Ass, at the very end, he's saved by ISIS, and then he dedicates his life to being a free lawyer for the poor. And
Right.
so the idea is you move past this point of initiation and figure out a way to implement the type of love that you felt while connecting to that different state of being.
And in mythology, the whole idea of the hero figure going off and discovering the gold or the treasure or getting the magic power or whatever is meaningless until they bring it back to society and do something with it, you know? So it is about do the inner work, bring it to the world. And Carl Jung's an interesting example. I don't know who here or who watching has looked at his Red book, but those were early, clearly mystical experiences for him that were followed by him building an entire career based on trying to make sense of those things and bringing those truths as best he could to his work in the world. So he never termed it knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, but that's what that looks like to me. And so we can probably find any number of examples like that.
Yeah, and that's almost like the forgotten part of the monomyth or the hero's journey is the return aspect.
Right.
So it's like
Right.
we always think that it's everything until, and then you're just there, and it's like no, you have to bring it back home, and then after you bring it back home, you have to return on the journey again, a changed person.
Mhm, mhm.
That's when the credits are rolling, so we don't need to worry about
that. Nice. Thanks,
Now,
Carlos.
I was gonna say I've heard the ideas of dilemma in comparison to the ideas of Platonic thinking and the ideas of the individual man building himself up to make the society as a whole better. Do you think that dilemma on some from the individual self exploration and opening up on a higher level, do you think it is aimed at a utopian end goal?
I think that that's true to the extent that we understand that doesn't mean that the world would then be perceived by every person as perfect.
Right.
Okay. That's never going to happen because we're always
Sure.
going to have personalities.
Yeah.
The only thing that likes or dislikes is the human ego, and it's very good at it. So it's always trying to do it. And so things will always be displeasing no matter what. But yeah, I think that the idea is as each of us does as much self-development as we can, then the world itself, we contribute to the world being a more harmonious place where there's less unnecessary conflict and people aren't as blinded by their confusion about who they are and their projections of negativity onto others and just all the stuff that makes us take the easy way out and not grow ourselves. But when we each do that, yeah, I think that the world becomes the place that it can be. Carl Jung was asked to incessantly come back to Jung, but he was asked in an interview around the 50s or so if there was this Cold War, right? So everything was scary. Not that it's not scary now, but it was scary then too. And he said, he was asked, is there any hope for humanity? And his answer was, if enough individuals do their inner work.
Right.
And that's my operating principle every day of my life.
Right. And in a certain sense, it kind of ties in with this perennialist idea of through the ages, the mystery schools coming into even the Catholic Church and dilemma and kind of the whole ultimate end goal, like Hinduism with the Kali Yuga sinking down and then rising back up into that attainment of the sun at the high peak of the mountain.
Yeah. And the perennial, linking onto the perennial aspect of that, the idea that there is one central truth that all paths are designed to kind of strive toward and illuminate. And the mistake is to say to someone else doing it a different way that they've got it wrong. And then you get to have holy wars and things. But it's the more we realize we're all aiming at the same thing. And, what if, here's my idea. If we could simultaneously get everyone in the world to have the awareness that what if the actuality is there's no choice but to all be worshiping the same God. And that's just the truth. And then anything anyone is doing is their best approximation of that. No one is in disagreement about that. If everyone could just get that it's all stories about the one thing,
Right.
and
And
we don't need to point fingers at who's doing it wrong.
Right. And that kind of ties into the ideas I was trying to kind of poke at with the larger aspects of the law. Yeah.
I see that.
Yeah.
And that almost reminds me of what Akhenaten was doing with having everyone come back and worshiping the sun, right?
Yeah, and of course, I'm not advancing the idea that there is a like a monotheism in the sense of now here's the doctrine of the one true religion.
Right. No, for sure.
Perhaps do what thou wilt, because that's just talking about truth,
Yeah.
But the doctrine is truth, and the paths are myriad, as we say.
Well, I feel like this has been the downfall of syncretism for so many times over the ages, with the Romans invading the Picts and with Christianity invading everybody, is that once you've syncretized enough to where you think we've got the philosophical basis for everything, all distinctiveness goes away from the people who were once not a part of that group. And so it becomes a push-pull of identity at that point. And, something better is out there than just, because Theosophy tried this, and, Crowley came out of the Theosophist movement, and, so many other things. And it gets blamed for everything because obviously the syncretism is changing the way people think in a cohesive way instead of a, dualistic or multipolar way that a lot of people would prefer because they want to remain distinct. And I think that distinction really hasn't been honored by American society in a lot of ways across the world. It's like everybody is now just individual replaceable units, and we're seeing the rebellion to that right now. So it goes really deep, I think.
Crystallization.
Yeah.
One question I did want to ask, you spent years bridging clinical psychology and Thelemic practice. What kind of first convinced you that these two can work together or belong together?
Well, obviously each human has component parts that we can label different ways, but the ego, in the Kabbalah psychology, the ruach, the part of us that is that needs to interface with the outer world and to have opinions and have goals and have plans and think of ourselves as an individual that's different from that other person over there, all of that sort of stuff. That's not going away. So it's inevitable that we've got to make all of that have some degree of transparency so that we can see the light that's behind it. So I whether someone works with a therapist to do that or just figures it out themselves, they've got to do that. Otherwise, their magic is going to be, their whole path is going to be skewed based on their blind spots, on their natural predispositions, on their underdeveloped areas that aren't ever developed. So that's one reason why systemization of the initiatory process is so helpful for a lot of people, is that it cultivates all the aspects of the self and helps to remove the blind spots. So for me, it just seemed inevitable that, I was already studying psychology, but it's like having arrived at the place where I was in the middle of starting a psychology career, but also having this huge nuclear blast of awareness about Thelema and the opportunities for self-development there, that it just, for me personally, just became an impossibility that they wouldn't be working together in my life.
Thank you. How should practitioners think about shadow work in a thelemic context without turning it into a self-obsession?
Oh, people will be self-obsessed anyway. It's inevitable. The trick is to do it well. No, I think shadow is any unacknowledged aspect of ourselves, and that can be positive, that can be negative. I've grown up within a system where monitoring started by Phyllis Seckler, Sora Merrill, my teacher, and in her eyes, she put in her training system from the very beginning that we must be monitoring our psychological projections on a daily basis in order to learn about what our shadow projections are and what our projections are generally. That we, by watching how we react to things, how we get emotional, how we overreact, we can get the kind of self-knowledge that's not available if we only look at, like, we're just navel gazing about who am I and what do I like, and we don't look at the potential dark sides of that. In terms of these projections, we're missing a whole bunch of work that can be so helpful. And so in our system now, as we teach it in Temple of Silver Star, we have people doing as part of their daily diary work. They monitor psychological projections. They are therefore in their bias, stripping away those filters and the mud that's all over the lens, to use that example again, that is blocking them from seeing their true self more clearly. So the shadow work is really just one example of projection work in many ways. But more broadly, shadow work in terms of understanding of what is it we're pushing out of awareness. Like, if we live in a box, called me, and we decide we're just going to live in this corner of it because we don't want to go in that part that makes us uncomfortable, then we're living in a tinier world. And so for fullness of self and life, we have to accept all of ourselves, even if our personality doesn't like it. So that's the bigger kind of picture of why do shadow work.
Well, it's funny in the looks maxing community. I know it's kind of become a convenient trope or meme online, but they talk about cortisol spiking, right? And so if you're out at a club and you're talking to somebody and then somebody else mogs you or makes themselves look better than you, your cortisol is supposed to spike. And this is like a convenient way of biologically analyzing yourself instead of actually looking at what it is that makes you feel that way. Right? So it's replacing embarrassment with a biological process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
But also learning to control that reaction as far as how you let things affect you.
Yep. And the good part of that, the good news there is that as we monitor our projections, that tends to happen pretty naturally. Like, we start to realize, oh, every time Joe starts talking and I get annoyed, it's because I'm insecure about him being smarter than me. So now I realize that about myself, and when I'm around Joe, I kind of go in the room knowing that, so, and that's kind of an organic process where it's harder to act stupid when we know it's stupid. When we've done the work. Not that we'll be 100% successful with that, for sure, as my friends can attest.
Does anybody have any questions before I ask another one before we move on to
I actually do.
All right,
And
please go.
it goes along the path of it's more towards the solitary magician. It's I can't say it's easy. It's it's a little bit easier when you're in a group setting. Either you're with dealing with the AA, Silver Star, or the Golden Dawn, or anything like that. For the solitary person, working their way up to Tiferet on the Tree of Life, sometimes what they're trying to strip away, what they're trying to face, is too much. And unfortunately, if they want to go to therapy, you said it yourself earlier, that the pool of ceremonial ceremonial magic psychologists that are more familiar with it and more accepting with it are hard to find.
Mhm.
But I do feel that along the lines, you probably do need to find a therapist to help you along. You need help along the way sometimes, because sometimes things are too burdensome for you to deal with. How would you recommend someone approach someone who, a therapist that may or may not accept their way of belief system, despite the fact that this is what they're trying to deal with at that time?
Right. So part of the answer to that is that there's probably 90% of what needs to be done can be done without even mentioning to a therapist that we're interested in the occult path. It's just that's just about being human. And of course, it feels better to have a therapist that could actually share a language like that and would understand that one of the reasons I'm here working on myself with you, therapist, is that I'm on a self-initiatory path, and I am trying to, you know, take this to a more mystical place and so on. But even without that, it's still going to be so valuable to have someone sitting in the room with you. Again, even if they don't have any idea of an occult path being part of your life, it's going to be so useful to have another person sitting there reflecting with you on your strengths and weaknesses and growth patterns and blind spots and shadow stuff and all of that. So I think the main thing in seeking out a therapist that would be compatible for an occultist is just to at least make sure that they're not um, they're not going to have a worldview that is like antagonistic to alternative spirituality. So that if it just comes up casually that you're a pagan or a occultist or a golden dawn magician or whatever, that they're not going to think that is pathology. Um, and fortunately, in today's world, I think most therapists have had enough breadth of training and life experience to know that there's a lot of paths out there. Um, but if someone's advertising themselves explicitly as they're a therapist from a particular religion, and you think that's not a very good mesh with your spiritual beliefs, and maybe that person isn't the best choice for this. But someone who says they are Jungian or transpersonal or humanistic or existential, or it's something that's got a built-in sort of openness to the breadth of life, I think is probably going to be a good choice. So kind of a long answer. I hope I hit on the basic question there.
Yes, you did, because sometimes people are a little hesitant on looking for help for that very reason. Sometimes.
Right, right. And it is true, and just like in communities, in smaller, more conservative communities, people still have to be careful about outing themselves as being interested in this stuff at all. So I get that it's a real issue.
Another question I had that I wanted to get your take on, so people have a better understanding. Maybe it is something you do discuss in your living Thelema. Uh, what is crossing the abyss often mean to you? Well, what is that?
So in the thelemic system of conceiving the overall path of the great work, there are two critical ordeals for the advancing initiate. One of them is knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, which we've discussed. And then the next one is crossing the abyss. So think of it this way: you've had knowledge and conversation. You have now a much more complete conscious understanding of what your true will is. So you, as we discussed earlier, take the next steps in making your life a place where that can happen. You keep doing that, you're very likely to be successful at it because by definition, it's what you're cut out to do. You found your dream job, except it's not just a job, it's your whole life. And if you keep doing that, you're likely to become known for doing that. You're likely to be good enough at doing that thing that you will bring yourself to kind of the culmination of what you can be as a human in the normal sense. You'll be self-actualized, to use a common term for that sort of thing. You've seen these people, they just seem to be so good at what they're doing. They're doing it out in the world and they're known for it, and it seems like they were just born to do it. And at that point, where do you go? If you're going to grow more, it can't just stay in the realm of, I'm going to make me better and better. I'll be bigger and bigger and greater and greater. And, that becomes at a certain point self-limiting and destructive, because the danger is that the ego takes over and is just so happy to be so good at all this that it wants to keep doing it and keep getting more and more famous for it and all of that. So at some point, the only next step available is giving it up and letting go, being willing to let go of everything that you've developed, being willing to say, what's more important is that this is helping the world, not that it feels good to me or that it's, so good for my life, So this is where we go from a bit more of an individual centric self-development model to let's bring it back to the world, like the monomyth return phase we were talking about, to now let me dedicate my entire life to service to the universe, whatever that means. Okay. So the real crossing of the abyss is being able to fully develop oneself and then offer it all out to the universe and let go of the individual focus. So another angle on this is that there is a part of us that has always been living across the abyss. This is the abyss of personal versus transpersonal, or of individual versus collective consciousness. Okay. A part of us, that star at our center, has always been there. The change is that our ego says, I now recognize consciously that the realist me is not the me I've thought of myself to be at all, and I can give that up because that's like a leaf blowing in the wind compared to the collective. So the real kind of cosmic consciousness attainment at that level is that kind of a shift that we consciously and intently let go of individual centered consciousness and embrace the all, really, or the non-dual consciousness at that level. So that's a lot, but it's not something, obviously, that is a common experience for many people, although that's one of those danger zones where with the right psychedelic, sometimes people who have done 2 banishing rituals in their life decide they've crossed the abyss and now have cosmic consciousness and are finished and all set. So I couldn't resist that
That's
snarky
good.
comment at the end. But
Yeah, no, that's good. I have a question to go along the lines of crossing the abyss. Can you now, for us and the audience, add in the understanding of where Corazon comes into that when crossing the abyss? Because in Crowley's work, it's like exemplified as so extreme that it'll completely eradicate. If you bring your ego across the abyss, you will be brought into the great Black Brotherhood or into the darkness forever, never able to crawl out. So I would love to hear your take.
yeah, sounds like that would be a poor choice, right? Like, you chose poorly. but yeah, Karanzan was sort of the demon. Karanzan was sort of Crowley's personification of chaotic, dispersed mental functioning that can happen when we are trying to hang on to ourselves in a process that demands we let go of ourselves. And if you struggle against that, you can drive yourself crazy. It's also a good way of understanding the way that transition of abyss crossing can actually feel. And Crowley describes this in various places, but it's everything becomes fragmented, and formula that have worked for you don't work, and nothing makes the sense it used to make, and each experience sort of is like a funhouse mirror of, so if you don't go into that consciously and with an awareness of what's happening, it just feels like you're going crazy. So Karanzan, I think, is a good like character that fits that kind of experience.
And
And,
then
and for context, that Karanzan shows up in Crowley's series of visions called the Vision that he recorded in the Vision of the Voice for listeners.
And then maybe you can or cannot answer this. I'm most likely you can, but you can choose not to. Do you think that Crowley was so far out of whack, or do you think I wonder about his workings in the desert then with what he was doing, taking Coranzon in himself, actually in the evocation? Like, what do you think of that?
Well, obviously, ultimately, it worked well for him in terms of his overall path. That might not be the prescription I would give to someone setting out for that work, but hey, try this. But through another lens, if what we are saying ultimately, if this is what we believe about the universe, that there should not be any artificial distinction between this or that, then the appropriate approach to Karanzan is not stay away from me, Karanzan. You're the bad thing I can't allow to be in my world. Instead, you just embrace it along with everything else, because it can't harm you if we're all one thing. It's all one energy. So I imagine there may have been some of that kind of intent with Crowley, that kind of, I'm going to deal with whatever's here because the choice, it's here. The choice is, am I admitting that or not? Am I pushing against what's real, or am I going to embrace what's real?
And to accept it and to know it, and then to be able to move past it.
Right. And or fuse with it, or envelop it like some sort of microorganism that just kind of globs around the next cell and gets bigger and is always growing instead of fighting against it.
Do you think, is it true? I've read so many different takes. Then did Victor Newberg go crazy after those workings?
I haven't done a whole lot of biographical exploration of Victor Newberg, but he didn't vanish completely after that. So I don't have a fully satisfying answer to that, but
that's okay.
I don't think he vaporized.
Yeah, and it's interesting how a lot of the skeptics want to not give these individuals autonomy. That like Victor Newberg didn't have his own autonomous being, as in going out there choosing to do this stuff with him. And I think that's fascinating, especially for those of us who have chosen to take certain entheogenic routes in our past, and then ourselves felt like we've gone crazy and did return. And it's like, if anyone were to see that from the outside, they'd be like, oh, somebody did that to you. And it's like, oh no, that was me.
Yeah, I guess that this is a good point to say that clearly looking at Crowley's personality and life choices and such, there's no expectation for Thelemites to live like Crowley lived. This is one of the other, probably a more misunderstanding more in the mainstream public, I would say, about this, when someone looks at Thelema and says, wait, Crowley was the head of this religion and he did all these things, and he had weird sex and took drugs and was sometimes not nice to people and all that, so why would anyone be a part of this religion? that assumes a worldview where religion, or the founder of religion, is a model for behavior. It's the system that is the model for behavior, not the human Crowley. And so here you get into trouble with what we might call Crowleyanity, where it's, the idea is Crowley the human is our model for behavior, which no one I know feels that way, but but maybe some people on the fringes think of it that way, and people encountering Thelema in the general public might be very confused about why anyone would be a part of a system that Crowley created.
Yeah.
Because undoubtedly, he sometimes made bad choices and treated people badly, and we've all got faults, of course.
Yeah, which is something I will state for myself, who I know that for people to listen to me talk, they'd be like, well, obviously you're a Thelemite. And internally I'm all like, yeah, that's definitely true. I've read and practiced and done the thing. But then when I see the new agey spiritual community out there and a lot of the Thelemites that call and pronounce it on all their banners, that's when that's like, it makes my nervous system tingle and cringe. And so it's really hard these days. Do you know what I mean? To be like, oh yeah, I'm a Thelemite. I'm like, no, I'm like, nah, I don't know. I've read Crowley and I like his, anyway. So that's kind of my own, like, I get really weirded out in those things, even though I'm like, yeah, definitely a Thelemite, of course. Yeah, do what thou wilt. Love is the law. Yeah. Anyway.
Understood.
Well, I think one of the big problems is that people don't understand that Crowley was an explorer at heart. Like, this is why he was a mountain climber. This is why he did extreme things in general, is because he was exploring other things. He's not necessarily a prophet on top of a mountain telling everybody what to do. That's a very different perspective. What he's trying to do is saying, this is what I have to do for me. Reading through 777, it seems like he's intensely self-critical, almost as much as he is about other people, because he's trying to properly explore these things in a way that is very hard to define, right? I mean, we're dealing with subjective experiences that are almost impossible to nail down. And that's something a lot of people miss out on with the exploration.
Good point.
Very well said. Thank you. Since it's getting into the show, I did want to get into it. For listeners who happen to hear like AA and think of it as a secret society, Aleister Crowley, could you let people know and give people an idea what is the purpose of that system?
Okay, so AA is Crowley's original. Crowley and George Cecil Jones, who he was working with, who were both in the Golden Dawn. Crowley and Jones worked together pivotally around 1907 to start the AA, which was his revisioning of a system of initiation coming out of the Golden Dawn that he thought would be kind of a new and improved way to do this. So it cut out all the group ritual work except for a couple initiatory experiences, and that are like in temple. But other than that, it's a one-to-one teacher-student training organization where the structure is always the same and the tasks are the same from grade to grade, but you're given one teacher. Now, a teacher might have many students, but each student only has one teacher. And the idea was, let's strip away the potential distraction of the social component that Crowley really had a bad taste in his mouth coming out of the Golden Dawn because of the way that group was administered specifically. And the AA began to publish a lot of the fundamental documents of the Thelemic tradition in the Equinox journal that Crowley edited for a number of years. And it has persisted in an unbroken line to today. There have been splinterings here and there, but it's never stopped. And we administer it today through the portal for my work with the AA is, as I said, onestarinsight.org. So it's the one-to-one teaching structure. Temple of the Silver Star, in contrast, is in service to AA, but has reincorporated a lot of the fundamentals and landmarks of the Golden Dawn temple tradition, of having group initiations and group ritual meetings that still have the component that what everyone goes home to do is their individual work in the structure, in terms of assignments and rituals and meditations and so on. So a lot of vibrant growth in both these organizations in the last 15 years or so. And I think the flame is burning as bright as it ever was. There's far more people involved than ever were in Crowley's time, for example.
Another question I have on that is, how do you think this discipline training protects people from like fantasy inflation or spiritual burnout?
Great question. I'll take burnout first, just because the word jumped out at me, and that's one of the helpful roles of community, that you genuinely have people who do care about each other, and they're all doing this work, and they're all uh, doing their best to bring the best of themselves to their interactions with their fellow seekers, so you get supported, and also you get the judgment, in a good way, like the practiced judgment of working the system that the chiefs of the temple can provide, providing guidance with, you know, testing on how a ritual is done, or reviewing a diary and kind of talking with the person about what that experience meant to them and how it fits into the personal mystical or magical work they're doing. And so you get eyes on your work by someone who has literally done the same work and been supervised by someone who made sure they were doing it the right way, and so on. And so the opportunity for self delusion is much reduced, where there's someone to catch it and say, no, actually, that result you had is expected for stage one and not stage four. So you're really, keep working on stage one, you'll get there. Be encouraging, but you keep people focused on the steps in front of them instead of letting them get ahead of themselves. You you're guiding a person through the work in a structured way, and so it's done in a stepwise fashion that has proven to be successful, um, has proven to set a good foundation for later work. And so in that way, it's one of the most efficient ways that I know of to train people, and really presenting the systems of initiation is one way of understanding my own true will in this world. Is It's clearly something that I care deeply about. So I think I got your question there.
Does anybody have any other ones before I keep going with this? What parts of the AA curriculum do you think might actually be the most misunderstood by outsiders? If you think there is any.
Well, most people outside the tradition have so many misunderstandings about what magic or occultism even is, or who Crowley was, that got his like large form misunderstandings. But on the micro level, the sort of the nerd level, I think you could point at particular rituals that may be misunderstood or mispracticed. Sometimes, Crowley writes, which is often with 2 or 3 levels of meaning. And there's what he seems to be saying you're supposed to do, and then you realize from reading his commentary somewhere else that what he's really meaning is like, that's just a metaphor for what's going on inside with your visualization. Or he says, to be doing something that sounds rather outlandish, but really it's a metaphor for a certain state of consciousness that you're supposed to hold during the performance of the ritual. So a lot of stuff like that is just people not reading deeply enough, or taking it too literally, or whatever. So that's probably a better answer than trying to drill down on a particular ritual practice or something like that.
That's an interesting answer. I like that. I would assume you'd be able to explain this. I do know, I think if somebody was actually interested in getting involved in one of these things, you would have to actually be suggested a certain group of books that you're supposed to be read, and then take a test on that before you can even become a student. Is that correct?
And the
Does it still work that way?
traditional AA approach to the student curriculum, um, a person writes us for basic information. They're given a list of books to collect and study for at least 3 months.
Mhm.
Anytime after that 3 months, well, once they've told us they have all the books, then the 3 month clock starts. Then anytime after the 3 months, they can request an examination. And if they pass that, they're invited to become a probationer. So that's the very traditional approach to AA work. For Temple of the Silver Star, initiation is by application and interview. So there's no pre-study sort of in that approach.
You want to go a little bit more into that one now too? Give people an idea about the difference, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the cardinal differences that I've already pointed out is the group versus solo aspect. Instead of being just you and your teacher, you're if you live near one of our working groups in Temple of the Silver Star, you attend a monthly ritual that is a group ritual for energy raising and healing and personal empowerment. And then you're with each initiatory degree, it's a tree of life-based system, just like the Golden Dawn and the AA. You're given a hefty pack of materials for reading and study and practice, and that will always include some writing and a little bit more academic leaning kind of learning, but then daily personal magical and mystical practices. And the psychological dimension is addressed through things like projection monitoring and other kinds of self-awareness practices. So this is all done in the context of the framework of a Golden Dawn type organization, but with the law of Thelema as its core. Like the whole point of it is an unfolding awareness of true will for the initiate. So there is some overlap in terms of the style of practice from AA and Temple of Silver Star, between the two. As you can imagine, we're all kind of Thelemites doing Thelemic work, but those are some of the key differences. And one person may be more suited for one and another person for the other. We've got a number of people, of course, over the years who've done them simultaneously because they're different enough and have different kinds of benefits and structure.
One thing I do want to ask you. Oh, go ahead, Brendan. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, thanks, Nick. My question then is somebody in the occult magical community who has his own school. He did his own thing. He has continually stated how the Golden Dawn does rituals up to a certain point, and then the AA kind of takes over and then has the ritualistic up all the way up into the Episimus. Is there any truth to that? It like goes all the way up to the minor, and then the Golden Dawn kind of stops itself, and then the AA picks up where that left off. Does that make any sense to you?
Well, that's if you look at the history of the systems, that's accurate in the sense that the original Golden Dawn didn't really conceive of their system as taking one all the way to the abyss, for example, and having initiatory degrees up to that point. That was one of Crowley's innovations with the AA. So you can, well, I'll speak to the organizations I run, but with Temple of Silver Star, our whole system does bring someone to knowledge and conversation of the HGA. One could do that in the Temple of the Silver Star and never join the AA. At that point, it's accurate to say that if one wanted to take it further, that would be in an AA structure, because getting beyond knowledge and conversation into the next steps is really beyond the scope of what we could do in some sort of group training experience. I mean, think about what we've been talking about here in terms of the nature of the abyss and all of that. How exactly would one, do a group ritual and have someone else train you in that experience? It's entirely, you're kind of on your own in the cosmos at that point. But getting up to knowledge and conversation, you may need human teachers, and so both AA and Temple of Silver Star get you to knowledge and conversation.
One question I got for you real quick. What does AA mean? Somebody's asking that in the chat.
It's more or less universal that it is one or another version of words in other languages meaning silver star. But I prefer publicly to, because there's so much debate about it and some degree of silliness around it, that it's easier just to say AA.
Yeah.
But one way or another,
You're gonna say it wrong.
it adds up to silver star. I do want to clarify that Temple of the Silver Star is a group that isn't AA, but it acknowledges that that sort of silver star in the name is, of course, hinting at the fact that we're in service to AA. So I say that because I don't want confusion about the Temple of the Silver Star being AA.
Is that more of a thelemic group that is like a precursor to the AA workings?
Well, some people do them simultaneously. It's probably more common for someone to come through the Temple of the Silver Star as a preliminary course of training and then later pursue AA work. Not because it has to be that way, but because the temple work is such a good foundation, so that when you go off and kind of do so much solo work, you've already had a lot of practice. You've already had a lot of supervised experience with ritual and diary keeping, and you got all that momentum. So you hit the ground running with AA as opposed to it being quite as much of a sink or swim thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. One thing I did want to ask you too, maybe you could let the listeners know. I think a lot of people get confused with the rituals that Crowley actually wrote. Like a lot of people, especially like in other communities, like the conspiracy community, I think they think like the pentagram ritual and the hexagram ritual was written by him. Could you let people know like the difference between like which ones were Golden Dawn and which ones was actually Crowley?
Well, let's take some of the basics. Like the Golden Dawn had the lesser ritual, the pentagram, and lesser ritual, the hexagram. Crowley presented those in more or less their Golden Dawn form in the early publications of the Equinox. But then he later went on to do his own versions of pentagram and hexagram rituals, which he gave different names to, that had slightly different purposes, but were his vision of sort of like a new aeon, new thelemic world version of some of those traditional rituals. So things like the star ruby and the star sapphire were Crowley's pentagram and hexagram versions. So that's probably the clearest example of things that get confused. Yeah, but a lot of you can't really overstate how much of Crowley's basic magical education was entirely through the filter of the Golden Dawn work.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And I would even say, and like his even probably fall on the tree a little bit differently than the other ones would.
Can you restate that?
Like what his rituals, if you wanted to map them on the tree, his would even fall somewhere a little bit differently. Like I think Star Ruby falls a little bit higher up the tree than the pentagram normally would.
In the sense, certainly in the sense that within the ritual itself, you are doing certain magical visualizations or actions that correspond to, spheres on the tree above Tefereth, and really going all the way up to the abyss there. So you're kind of plugging yourself in at the pentagram level, but also stretching yourself up to encompass the whole tree after a fashion. And the traditional Golden Dawn style lesser pentagram ritual doesn't do that. So that is a good example.
One thing I did want to ask you about you and your hexagram ritual. Not to put you on the spot. I do think, if I remember correctly, in Living Thelema, you actually do change it a little bit compared to how it was. I think the wording, like Apophis and maybe even something with Isis, I think you might have changed it up. Could you tell us why?
Yeah. So when Crowley published when Crowley published the Equinox and he published the traditional Golden Dawn versions of the pentagram and hexagram rituals, this was before he had fully embraced what the law of Thelema was going to be in his life and how he wanted to teach that and what the implications would be for rituals or doctrines or whatever. So, and what he eventually did with the Star Sapphire as a hexagram ritual doesn't really replace the function of the traditional ritual of the hexagram in terms of being able to invoke or banish specific planets or zodiacal regions and things like that. So, so what I felt and of course, in Temple of the Silver Star, we have uh, private different versions that accomplish the same thing. But what I did in Living Thelema was I wanted to talk about the hexagram ritual. I didn't want to just represent an old Aeon, so to speak, version from Crowley's early days before he really had time to think it through more. And so I tried to come up with like a Thelemic era version of the hexagram ritual that would let go of some of the vaguely Christianized symbolism that was left over in the Golden Dawn in terms of the dying God formula as we know it, the sort of Christ formula, and make it more Thelemic. So I changed some of the terminology and intention behind the work there. But the other thing is, when Crowley published the hexagram ritual, this is really nerdy, and I apologize, but for those doing a deep dive, the original publication of the hexagram ritual by Crowley described how the hexagram ritual would have been done within the vault of the Golden Dawn, the second order vault, where the attributions to the quarters are different.
Changed. Yeah.
And so what I presented in Living Thelema was how someone approaching this work as an aspirant, presumably not in a Golden Dawn second order vault, would do it with the elements in the quarters just the same as they are in the pentagram ritual. So that was another important part of the way I presented it that's different from some other published sources.
I forgot about that. I do think I remember there could be a difference where it'd be like either air or fire you're starting off with in the East, right? Depending on how, or I could be wrong on that.
Right. Yeah. So, like in a pentagram ritual, you've got air in the East and then coming around. And in the, that's the way I could form the hexagram ritual to be as well.
Yeah.
And it's not that I did it, it's that the tradition had always done it and it just hadn't been published correctly that way with an identification of why.
Nice. Yeah, I forgot all about that. I used to see people, I guess, argue over which direction you're supposed to be starting or which element you're starting off with, depending on. I'm sure you've seen how people can mind fuck Thelema on the internet, or traditional like magical use. I mean, people argue about anything sometimes, but I do get it. There is a difference depending on the situation.
And if we are
People are
arguing,
still
we are not
arguing.
practicing.
Right. People are still arguing over the thought deck and what Crowley did there. So, I mean, he laid out his reasons pretty well. So, I kind of agree with him a little bit more. But what are your thoughts on that? The changes to the thought deck versus the Rider Waite?
Yeah, I mean, primarily the Hazadi switch in terms of the emperor and the priestess. I'm sorry, the star and the priestess, the star and the emperor. I'll get this right. Being swapped in their places on the tree, or the attributions to them being swapped, and so. And I've grown up with the Thoth deck, so it's a little hard to feel it the old way, and say, here's the different vibe, because I never really lived with the pre-Crowley version. But certainly there's a lot of debate. I'm the last person who's going to come in here and say there's one correct tarot or something like that. I think it's pretty evident from our discussion here that there's lots of ways to get effective work done, and arguing just delays our progress.
Okay.
Do you think that book 4 is still one of the greatest tomes to read for somebody who not only wants to be a beginner but also somebody who is an advanced practitioner?
If you have aspirations to work in a Thelemic context, that's indispensable. We're talking about the Big Blue book 4,
the Big Blue,
which contains the Little book 4, which used to be the only thing out there.
Yeah,
all book 4. But it just such a compendium of important stuff and a pretty impressive editorial apparatus as well, which weaves it all together. It's probably not the best book for a beginner to pick up and say, let me get into Crowley, unless you're really going to start at the beginning and of the book and focus on some of those preliminary materials first. But I think that things like, you didn't ask this question, but I think things like 8 lectures on yoga, maybe Magic Without Tears, in terms of Crowley stuff that might be more approachable for a beginner. And then, there is some good modern stuff out there. Obviously, I did my books, but Lon Duquette does some great texts that are good for beginners too. And so thankfully, we continue to grow.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, my first 2 were Book of Thoth and 20 years ago, and at the same time, The Big Blue Brick. And I haven't looked back since.
Yeah.
And what's
Good.
beautiful about those things is that they like unveil themselves, so it's like it was like the Book of Thoth was so meaningless and yet had so much meaning at the same time, where I'm all like, oh my Lord, I know this means something. I need to figure out what is going on with this, because you get little gems and stars as you're reading it. And then you can read it a year, 5, 10, 20 years later, you're like, now it's unfolding like a hyper sigil or like a great diagram.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's kind of a universal experience, I think, of people approaching this work, that whenever you read anything, you realize you needed to read 10 other things first. And so then you read those things, and then that leads to the next 100 books,
Keep going backwards or in other directions. Yeah.
Right.
That's possibly, I think, part of the game, right? Or part of the fun of it, maybe. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
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 It's
Part of the
a fun
journey.
rabbit hole.
Yeah. Did anybody have any other questions before we wrap it up? No, everybody's sure. Okay. David, was there anything that you would like to say or like leave us with, either about like, Thelema, AA, Silver Star, promote yourself? What would you like to leave us with, I guess?
Well, I've thrown out enough, I think, URLs and things, but I'll kind of close on what I often try to do with people, is encourage them that if you're interested in this work, there's a lot of avenues of solid training and/or resources for your personal work, personal study. But the main thing is to just persist. You're going to have dry times, you're going to have dark times, you're going to feel disillusioned, and that's just going to happen no matter what path you're on, and no matter how you're doing it. But don't give it up. Don't stop. Do the work even if you don't feel like it on certain days, and trust that at your core it's making a difference, and keep persisting and aspiring.
Thank you very much, Dr. David Shoemaker. Before we wrap it up, let me have everybody real quick, let everybody know where they can find the other rejects. Judith, how are you? What's going on? Let everybody know where they can find your stuff.
First, thank you, Dr. David Shoemaker, for sharing your knowledge with us today. It was very enlightening and encouraging at the same time. It's nice to be on the panel where everybody else is the same too. And you can find me on YouTube and on Twitter. On X as the Loon. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for making it. And my man, Headless Giant.
How you doing? You can find me on X and on YouTube. Tonight we're doing more Rustic Gods with Jules. So I'll tell you when I find out, but check my Twitter to see that time slot. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Headless. And my man, Brandon, the Magus.
Yes, thank you so much, Nick. This was fantastic. Thank you, Dr. David Shoemaker. Your work has been indispensable in our fields. And I was just like a giddy little schoolgirl when Nick told us all that you were going to be coming on. So this was fantastic. Everyone, come check me out. I'm going to be dropping a lot of different videos coming up with my live streams. I have Dr. Heather Lynn coming on. I've got I got American Esoteric. We got all kinds of stuff going on. Go over to YouTube, Magus in the Media, X, Magus in the Media on Instagram. Thank you again.
Thank you, Brandon. And Robbie Marks.
Yes, this was great. Thank you, Dr. Shoemaker. It was great to meet you and talk to you, and I appreciate your time that you spent with us. As far as myself, Robbie Marks, artist, illustrator, you can check out all my stuff on my Linktree at Linktree RMARX, and that'll pull up everything for you. And thanks again, Nick.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. And again, Dr. David Shoemaker, thank you so much for coming on. It was really a pleasure. Again, you really hugely shaped my outlook on magic. There was a time where I wasn't sure about it anymore, and looking at the way you did it was really what kept me in it, and I do believe is what helped me have the experiences I did. So again, you're just a very influential person, and I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. This is totally blowing my mind, and it was really a selfish treat for myself to even have a conversation with you. So, but I do think you left the listeners with a lot of great information as well. So I appreciate it.
I hope so. It's been delightful. I enjoyed meeting you all, and great questions and discussions. So thank you very much.
Of course. No, thank you. And thank you, everybody in the chat. That's why we go live. Thank you for the questions and the comments. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.